Good morning, everyone. If I can ask you to start taking your seats, please sit up front, up close. We're going to get started in just a moment. Wonderful to see everyone this morning. President Shahid, Minister Linda, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends. I'm Elizabeth Cousins. I'm the President and CEO of the United Nations Foundation, and I am delighted to welcome you all here this morning for this special event on achieving a sustainable, inclusive recovery, reshaping economies that work for women. We are honored to be co-hosting this session with the President of the General Assembly and the Government of Sweden, particularly Foreign Minister Linda. You are also personally both such fierce champions of gender equality, and we are all grateful to you for that. We all know that as much as there is greater attention to equity for girls and women than there has probably ever been before, there is also more pushback, and there remains stubborn inertia and resistance that we must overcome, so that our societies and economies not only embrace full rights and equal rights for girls and women, but also benefit in very practical ways from their realization. So this morning we will first hear opening remarks from President Shahid and Minister Linda, and we'll then have a discussion moderated by our good colleague Sarah Hendricks, Director of Program Policy and Intergovernmental Relations at UN Women. And so with that, it is my very distinct honor to turn the floor over to His Excellency, President Abdulla Shahid, President of the 76th Session of the UN General Assembly. President Shahid, the floor is yours.
Minister Linda, President Cousins, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to begin by thanking all of you for attending today's special event. It is truly an honor to partner with the Government of Sweden and the UN Foundation. My dear friends, pandemics throughout history, from the Black Death in the 14th century to the 1980 in influenza, have caused serious demographic shifts, mortality shocks, and increased social tensions, discrimination, and political disturbances. COVID-19 is no exception, and as with previous historical instances, women are being and are bearing a disproportionate share of the burden, including in the labor market. From available data, women are more likely than men to work in professions that put them on the front lines of the pandemic, such as childcare and healthcare. They were thus more likely than men to have faced direct exposure to COVID-19. Compounding this, they are more likely than men to have lost their employment in the past 2 years, even as they continue to shoulder the burden of caregiving demands wrought by COVID-19. This has confronted millions of women with a stark choice of either maintaining their jobs or caring for their families. According to the ILO, fewer women than men will regain work during COVID-19 recovery. Their projections estimate that only 43.2% of the world's working-age women will be employed in 2021, and this is compared to 68.6% of working-age men. This is a clearly unfair discrepancy. We have an obligation moving forward to reshape our work culture, work models, and economies in a manner that works for women. Excellencies, COVID-19 has in many ways changed our outlook on what we had previously taken for granted. It has also given us an opportunity to do things better, to reshape economies and societies that are more sustainable, more resilient, that takes care of all our citizens. The policies we implement today will shape the world we live in tomorrow. And we have an opportunity to rethink the policies that have hindered women's full participation in the workforce, their full integration into the economies. Governments and the private sector have an important role to play in that regard. They must work together to shape impactful policies that targets structural barriers that have hitherto hindered women's participation in labor force. Success requires new and innovative work models, tailored policies that address specific gender requirements in workplaces, and the creation of more empathetic work cultures. The workplace of the future must be rooted in equity and free of discrimination and harmful stereotypes about women's skills, work ethic, leadership abilities, or intellect. Workplaces must be free of the barriers and biases that have been historically used to limit the opportunities for women, undermine their advancement, and depress their wages. Furthermore, instilling gender equality and equity practices would require interventions in the form of strong legal protections, robust enforcement mechanisms, and deep structural and cultural changes. It also requires recognizing women's special circumstances and the importance of implementing a care economy, one that includes women's voices in the planning of responses and recovery plans. Today's dialogue, my dear friends, offers an important opportunity to identify strategies and policies that will ensure greater participation of women in the future of sustainable economies, especially in high-impact sectors such as food, energy, and manufacturing. This could include greater financing or upskilling or greater capacity building, including in the digital space. Let us make full use of this opportunity and have a constructive dialogue on how we can secure not only a more gender-equal recovery, but a gender-equal world. I thank you. Thank you.
Minister Linda, may I invite you to the stage?
Thank you very much, President Shahid, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. From the Swedish government, we are delighted to welcome you to Stockholm on this important event. Sweden has a feminist government and we pursue a feminist foreign policy. In practice, this means that we apply a gender perspective to everything we do. The aim is to strengthen women's and girls' rights, representation, and resources. Sweden was the first country to pursue a feminist foreign policy, but now I'm very happy that we are 9 countries who pursue this policy: Canada, France, Luxembourg, Spain, Mexico, Germany, Chile, and Netherlands. And more are coming to join us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a time of crisis. Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine is, of course, in all our minds. In addition, the pandemic is still having its hold on the world. And then, not least, the accelerating climate and environmental crisis. The urgency of the climate crisis means that we need to take advantage of all synergies, not least between climate action and gender equality. Sweden is on the forefront of climate transition as well as of gender equality. In 2019, Sweden adopted a climate policy action plan that also states that gender perspective is to permeate all climate action. This is based on the simple fact that women and girls represent half of the world's population, and it's untapped resource for sustainable and green economic development. Failure to consider the gender perspective could therefore prove damaging in realizing a green economy. Gender equality matters for an effective greening of economic in many ways. These concern areas like consumption patterns, access to economic and productive resources, information and knowledge, and the ecological footprints. Report from the World Bank shows that women's economic empowerment is beneficial for general human development because women tend to invest more in nutrition, health, and education. Women and girls are key actors for environmental protection since they often possess knowledge, capabilities, and effective networks to drive solutions in the area of sustainability. Women and girls are important agents of change. Given women's engagement in environmental sector, women could benefit greatly in terms of green and decent job opportunities. There are several increasing and interesting examples of this, for example, in the renewable energy sector, as well as in ecotourism. Ladies and gentlemen, cooperation and building alliances with all actors have seldom been more important than right now. The multilateral system is at the core of such a cooperation. I would like to highlight the UN Women's Generation Equality Initiative as an important example of multi-stakeholders cooperation where actors from different sectors come together to work for increased global gender equality. Within this initiative, Sweden is a co-leader of a global action coalition on economic gender equality. In this coalition, we now have a substantial action plan, and we are working for concrete results in areas such as gender-responsive public governance system, not least connected to the green transition, and gender equality in the labor market. We are also working for the elimination of discriminatory laws and policies and to strengthen gender-responsive social protective systems, like affordable childcare and parental leave. When it comes to the green economy, here are some measures that I think needs to be taken. We have to put our efforts in women and girls' education and training to strengthen their opportunities to advance from low-skill positions to high-skill and higher-paying green jobs. We must also work to eliminate discriminatory laws and counteract discriminatory policies and attitudes when it comes to women's economic empowerment and employment. And we need to strengthen human rights and social dialogue in the workplace, as well as women in trade unions, for the benefit of the gender equality and green transition. To close the gender-digital divide, it's also an important challenge. In conclusion, to successfully transition into a green economy, we need a feminist perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Linde. My name is Sarah Hendricks, and I am absolutely delighted to serve as moderator for this very special event, organized by the President of the General Assembly, together with the UN Foundation, on this milestone that is Stockholm plus 50. And indeed, this is not just a milestone here in Stockholm, but it is a moment of urgency as we are called upon to envision a sustainable and inclusive world and economies and societies that work for all, and especially work for women and girls, particularly as the world recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. Gender inequality coupled with environmental crises are indeed the most urgent sustainable development challenges of our time. And it is this topic that the UN focused on at this year's Commission on the Status of Women, really looking at advancing a blueprint for change for all stakeholders to take on board. So let's now have a conversation on what we need to do for a gender-responsive recovery that sustains both people and planet. I'm absolutely delighted to invite onto the stage a very esteemed panel to join Minister Linde. And so, if you would, could I invite Your Excellency, President Abdulla Shahid, President of the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, to take a spot right here at the table beside me. And joining President Shahid will be Ms. Angela Zhang, a Girl Up leader. Angela, come onto the stage and you can join President Shahid. Furthermore, I'd like to invite our final two panelists, Ms. Cynthia Wandia Mburu, who is the co-founder and CEO of Quara. Cynthia, you could take a spot at the table to my very left. And Cynthia will be joined by Ms. Diana Amini, Global Manager of the H&M Foundation. Diana, if you want to join Cynthia. Well, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation together. I'll pose a question to each of you in turn and invite you to keep your remarks to approximately 3 minutes. Let's start with yourself, President Shahid. No problem. In your remarks, President, you said that we must reshape our work culture and that we need to also have work models and economies that really fundamentally work for women. I'd be interested in your perspective on how you actually see that being implemented. How can we translate your words into action? How do you see also engaging men and boys as gender allies in achieving a sustainable recovery from the pandemic? Over to you, President Xi.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome to the panel. It's an absolute honor for me to be here this morning to engage with such a great panel and the great audience at this celebration of 50 years of Stockholm, where the foundation for environmental awareness has really been laid way back in 1972. And believe it or not, I was a little bit younger in 1972. Lots of more hair and much more energy. But it also takes me back to the time when I was younger. The time when, in my own country, in the Maldives, we tried to create the opportunity for women and engage women in our workforce and create space for women. I'm still struck by how we approached it. The president of that time created women development committees. I still have a copy of a picture of that committee. Not even a single woman in the committee. It was all men. And men were tasked with creating space for women. And I think it was absolutely wrong the way we did it. Come back to the question, how do we make space for women in work, culture, how do we provide opportunities? The first thing and the last thing that we have to continue to do is give women a voice. Let women speak. Let us men, historically who has dominated the socio-cultural platform for millennia, let us give room for women and listen to them. Understand from them what and how they would be able to come on board. Without doing that, however much we try, it will not work. We will not, and I'm speaking from a man's point of view, I think we will not be able to understand the point of view of a woman unless we hear it, we give space, and provide that opportunity. So that is the first and the last thing we have to do. And I'm so glad that here on the stage we have 4 outstanding women, young girls, from whom I, as President of the General Assembly, can understand today. But women alone cannot and will not be able to do it. Because men, because of the cultural overtake we have for millennia, we have overcrowded the platform. We will have to partner and get our partnership going. I'm disappointed that we have so few men in the room today. Because without the men understanding this, without the men partnering with us, we will not be able to give that space for women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Shahid, for your words around women's voice and agency, but also for your intention around shifting spaces, shifting power dynamics, so that there is space for women's voice, agency, and leadership to rise up. We know that this is undervalued, under-recognized, under-supported, and especially under-resourced. And so it's leadership like yourself that creates that space for agency and leadership to thrive, and we thank you. Minister Linda, I would love to turn to you now. In your opening remarks, you highlighted Sweden's feminist foreign policy. I think emphasizing that this is now joined by 9 other governments around the world. We'd love to hear, how can Sweden and the Swedish feminist foreign policy contribute towards a sustainable as well as inclusive recovery that really shapes economies that fundamentally work for women? Over to you, Minister Lind.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I'm often asked this question about why do we have a feminist foreign policy and how can it contribute? And to start it off, it's very simple answers, because there is the daily life of women and girls are discriminated. There is subordination, there is discrimination, there is bias. And there is always a gender perspective that is not being taken into account. All experience show that the more gender equal a country is, the more secure it is, and therefore gender equality is also a question of security. And apart from being a security issue, we know that the women's economic empowerment is a key to sustainable development and to use these resources in another way than they are used today. The OSCE also estimates that in the increase of female employment account for 10 to 20% of the overall average annual growth in Sweden and the Nordic countries. So by getting more women out in the workforce, we also have a more economically stable situation. I also would like to mention the pandemic, because even if many countries feel we're out of it, don't think of it, just make it go away, I think the recovery packages is something that needs to have a gender perspective. Because even if the pandemic itself was harder hit to men than to women in terms of number of deaths and so on, the consequences of the pandemic were harder on women. And I say that we need to see both how many women that lost their jobs, how many women did not have enough social coverage, and how many women had to stay at home because there were homeschoolings and they closed the childcare centers and so on. It was the women who had to take that, and now they are back in the development in many countries more than what they have gained before. We are also co-leader of the Global Action Coalition on Economic Gender Equality. We work a lot with the UN Women, but here I think it's important to work together. We work with the Gates Foundation. I and Melinda Gates has already had 2 activities together. We work with the NGO, we work with the private sector, and I think that we need to make this cooperation systemic and not just ad hoc. And we have too much silos. We in the government, we do our thing, and you do their thing, the private sector do their things, and we need to connect this into each other, otherwise we won't get the result that we could do. I see a possibility for a greater global collaboration around economic empowerment and green transition. And this is something that my government really would work for. I was chairperson of the OSCE last year, and what I saw there was that the concept of climate and security was very much interlinked. And also we have a gender perspective in this. So the importance of the security and the climate agenda to be linked together with a gender perspective, that I think is a key for a successful green transition. And what I hope finally is that in our presidency of the European Union, starting the 1st of January, we will take all of these perspectives into account. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Linda, especially for highlighting the important integration of a just and green transition, of security and of gender equality, particularly as we look at COVID recovery. And in particular, I think prioritizing gender-responsive, just transitions. You spoke about decent work as needing to be central to that. We also know how critical social protection is, and putting care at the center of that gender-just transition is also a critical part of this green transition and recovery, and particularly needs to be strengthened as we think about providing a bulwark against the economic as well as the environmental shocks that have come about through COVID-19. Thank you so much, Minister Linda, for your leadership and also for highlighting the importance of multi-stakeholder action, of moving beyond our silos, of incorporating the effective efforts as well as vision of all actors and the ways in which Sweden's leadership as part of Generation Equality and the Action Coalitions brings that to life. Thank you so much. I'd like to now turn to yourself, Angela. Angela Zhang is a Girl Up leader, and we are thrilled that you are here today. Thank you so much, Angela, for the energy that you bring to climate action and to climate justice. And we love to hear about some of the ways that you feel that youth would like to get involved in leading the transition to a more sustainable society. What's that role of youth? What is your vision for it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'm super thrilled to be here as well. I can start off with a very direct, substantive response to the question, but also want to highlight some of the themes behind it as well. So I think to start off, there's already been a lot of progress being done with Stockholm Plus 50, with the Youth Task Force, the highlights of everyone who's been able to engage in the Youth Assembly while not feeling siloed, being able to engage with high-level events and not just that Youth Assembly. I think was really important to making sure that youth innovations, that youth experiments, that youth startups are all able to receive the same sorts of funding and support that all other types of climate technology and innovations get. But I think one area that I'd like to highlight within these different industries is the industry of education. Not in just the sense that universities and schools need to be teaching climate and gender justice more, but also in the sense that universities are supposed to be these bastions of like experimentation, that they're supposed to try the new things and see what works and research and try again. But at the same time, these students who are being taught to be researchers are then told by administration that their ideas won't work in that university or in that high school or elementary or primary. It really doesn't stop. So I think that that's one area where youth are basically the consumers, right? We are the ones who are supposed to get the benefits of this industry. That's somewhere that I would like to see a lot more administrative support. And I think that when you have these youth speaking on what this education should look like for a more sustainable future, we can create norms and practices where it becomes possible, where we can manifest that future. But also, I think taking a step back from this more direct approach and tackling the problem. I think that we need to re-envision what youth leadership even looks like. So I think that it's super exciting that a lot of the climate activists who I look up to are young women who are leading the change, and I think that's amazing. But I also think that the current structure of leadership means that a lot of youth are incentivized to be always starting something new. But I think that there's also a lot of room to be worked with in institutional structures like these, like this panel today, like Stockholm Plus 50, where there needs to also be incorporation of youth there as well. So I think we don't need to always be competing with each other for just like a couple speaking opportunities or media engagements or whatever. But I also think that there's room to engage with the existing structures, because those are going to be here, at least for the short term. And so we might as well make what we can of it while we're here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angela, for those words. And a couple of things struck me as you spoke. You spoke about re-envisioning youth leadership. You spoke about innovation. But I also loved the way you talked about manifesting a future. And manifesting a future that is based on youth vision and youth innovation and expertise. So thank you for all your words and your leadership in climate action and climate justice. This is a great segue, actually, to yourself, because Angela talked about innovation, and Cynthia, who is co-founder and CEO of Quara, we know that the world is experiencing massive technological shifts, massive digital demographic changes at a pace that is faster than ever before. In your eyes, Cynthia, how can we really harness these emerging technologies in a way that really accommodates for a more just, a more sustainable future for all? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, technology must be built by women and not just for women. This simple distinction creates a step change that allows us to direct the benefits of innovation towards amplifying the strengths, skills, and successes of women in the workforce rather than further exclude them. Otherwise, we risk increasing the digital divide even more. And technology doesn't always have to be cutting edge, but it must be accessible. The humble feature phone has put financial services in the pockets of millions of women worldwide. And that was services that were previously inaccessible. Once again, the simple key to independence has enabled women to take more control of their financial situation and prepare their own access into the workforce. Technology always bends towards regulation, and therefore regulation has an incredible opportunity to incentivize innovators towards solving for a more just workforce. At the same time, models that are built on data that previously only considered men risk further growing levels of inequality for women in the workforce. We at Quara harness the power of neobanking, which is personalized, low-cost, instant financial services, to amplify a simple, humble financial institution, the credit union, that tends to comprise mostly of women. So by bringing in technologies enjoyed by some of the leading financial institutions into the organizations that are run by women, we're seeing that the growth of the credit union means the growth of the woman who's a member of it. I'm optimistic, as is the nature of an entrepreneur. And I would also add that the market size is huge. The opportunity for women being part of the workforce is good for everyone, commercially as well as socially. Thank you.
Thank you so much, particularly for your impatient optimism. I think we need more impatient optimists in this moment of urgency, in this moment of transition and change, in order to drive forward and, as your colleague said, manifest the future that is sustainable, that is an inclusive, sustainable economy for all. Now let's hear from yourself, Diana. Diana, you are the global manager of the H&M Foundation. We would love to hear an example from your work, really fundamentally leading in the fashion and the textile industry around the transition to more sustainable and inclusive economies. What's your perspective from the private sector?
Well, I mean, representing the non-profit H&M Foundation, I see myself representing the philanthropic sector, and I definitely think that we have an important role to play because we have the closeness to an industry that is both resource intensive and also have a lot of social challenges. So I see our role as identifying, the challenges and also enabling the collaborations needed to actually drive systems change. And I think the pandemic exposed, the broken system that we actually have today and all the challenges that come with that in an even more way. And at this point, it's like two waves, transformation waves going on. It's sustainability and it's digitalization. And like in every big shift, I would say, there are, of course, great opportunities, but there are also some risks, specifically for people who are already marginalized. So I would like to focus on an example of what we're doing in Bangladesh, where we even prior to the pandemic saw that women tended to be pushed out of the industry, the ready garment industry, due to digitalization, automation. And it's women, young women, maybe the first job, they have the most low-skilled jobs taken over of machines. So then we gathered various stakeholders. It was representatives from the government, it was brands, it was suppliers, it was civil society, and of course the women themselves, to look at how can the future work for women garment workers in Bangladesh look like. And it's easy to focus on, the skills development, upskilling, reskilling, which is of course super important for women to be able to take on more senior roles. But then the situation is complex, as every social topic is. So it's like, what about the perception about women's capability to take on senior roles, even though they have the skills maybe? What does the enabling environments look like? Do they have safe transportation to the factory? Do they have childcare? Do they have access to health, nutrition? So it's super complex. So what we're doing now is to build a program with a collective impact approach where we gather various stakeholders to actually work on this together, to co-create. And to also see the opportunities, because we know that many of these women who are now part of the ready garment industry won't be able to be it further on. So what new types of jobs will be available within the circular economy, within green jobs, recycling technologies? I mean, there's a lot of opportunities, but we need to work jointly and we need to stay ahead of the transformation, to prepare for this.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think your points really dovetail nicely with many of the points that have been raised, particularly as we think about this transition and how and where women will be in blue and green economies in terms of decent work. And are we fundamentally across the world? This is a ubiquitous challenge. This applies as much to my country of Canada, to the situation you've described in Bangladesh, to Sweden, to the US, to the whole world. How are we supporting women to enter into not only leadership roles, building on your points, President, but also into decent work opportunities in the circular economy, in blue and green economies? I worry that we haven't fundamentally unpacked that, and your vision of building from a co-creative approach and designing fundamentally a vision for change is inspiring. I also appreciate the way you said that COVID-19 has acted almost as a big revealer, a magnifying glass of systems that were broken. And this is an opportunity to take that which is now revealed to us almost in 4D and figure out what is that transformation to shift in terms of systems change. This is a huge opportunity, and it's an urgent one. And I think that the perspectives that you've all raised are critical contributions to it, to the answers. I would love to take just a few more minutes before we go to the audience to hear all of your perspectives on one final question. And I'm going to do that horrible moderation thing where I'll give you a single minute to respond to a question that I think deserves obviously more than a minute. So we know that the climate crisis is absolutely not gender neutral. Nothing is ever gender neutral. and particularly the climate crisis, particularly the triple planetary crisis, as the Secretary General has called it. Women and girls experience the impacts of climate change in a disproportionate and differentiated way. So as you think about how countries are recovering from COVID-19, how can we shape and reshape economies to work for women, particularly in high-impact sectors with the largest climate, nature, and pollution footprints? So really focusing in on those high-impact sectors with those significant climate footprints. Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you very much, and you're so right. When we look at climate disasters, 90% of victims are women, and this is unbelievable. You look at the Indian Ocean tsunami, you look at the cyclones in the Bay of Bengal, you look at what is happening in the Sahel, victims are over 90% women. So we have to make sure that on a recovery phase, we mainstream gender issues completely. And that can only be done by making sure that everything we do goes through a gender lens. And if we are not able to look through a gender lens on every perspective of recovery, we will be off track.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And over to yourself, Minister Linde.
Thank you very much. I would like to take a little bit of what Cynthia said about the use of technology and also what Diana said about reskilling and upskilling, because I think here is one of the keys to get more women into this whole green transition, because still, like when many decades ago, when I myself went to a technical secondary school, there were just a small percentage of women, and this education leads to the jobs in the green transition that is needed with then women perspective. So also to get a more equal education system when it comes to technologies, to maths, to physics, to chemistry, we need to get more women in there to make the green transition also more gender neutral with a gender perspective. And I think this is one of the keys we need.
Thank you so much, Minister Linde, and a great connection, I think, to yourself, Cynthia, around STEM education, around the importance of school-to-work transitions in green and blue economies. What are your perspectives?
Yep. So there cannot be technology built by women if women are not included in the education towards a path towards technology. And so the pipeline starts very, very young. The environment of who gets to go to school, who gets to study what, compounds, and we realize the effects many years on. We get an unprecedented visibility into the importance of small-scale farming for women, as part of what we do with the credit unions, because credit unions tend to be groups of people, often women, who come together, pool their savings, and allow each other to access more than they would on their own. And so for me, the looming climate crisis puts at risk one of the most accessible ways that women have in many markets to access some level of financial independence. If it's no longer predictable that the small investment you put into a small-scale farm will convert into an economic output, then I fear for what happens there. And so introducing technology that doesn't take away from the ability of women to contribute, but rather allows us to prepare and identify imminent risks like drought or imminent risks like market price crashes, and adjust the approach well in advance, gives us a chance to help some of the women who are reliant on small-scale farming to avoid being the last to be considered. But combining that with putting in education for girls in the STEM sector at the very beginning, that gives us a better shot at equalizing the workforce and protecting the impact of women, the impact of the climate crisis on women.
Yeah, thank you so much, both for pointing out the importance of technology in terms of resilience to economic shocks. And we all know that when economic shocks happen, it is women and girls who fall further into poverty, both first and recover last. But also pointing out the important transformation journey of technology and STEM education for the transformation of the whole economy overall. Over to you, Cynthia. I'd love to. Sorry, Diana. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear your perspective from the vision of the work that you do from a philanthropic lens. Yeah.
I think we need to challenge ourselves within all sectors to have a more holistic perspective. I think it goes for how we kind of structure our societies, that it tends to be like, we work on the planet. We work, for people. We live 360 degrees life in nature. We are people. We're not just at workplace and then home. We need to and it's complex, but I think we need to have all these glasses and lenses. It would be a lot of glasses to have, but we need to have them to actually drive systems change. And then the second thing I would like to highlight is also to challenge stereotypes, to drive perception change. It's a lot about representation. It's a lot about you can't be what you can't see. You need the role models to kind of aim for a new future. So I think that is super important as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm picturing all of these glasses and these lenses. We talk about the difference of vision when we actually see things through that lens of gender equality. But having gender and climate lens, when we look at anything, particularly when we look at budgets, public and private finance through the lens of gender equality and climate can actually make a huge difference. You have got the very last word. Angela, we'd love to hear from you on this final question.
Yes, absolutely. I think one thing to note is that the vast majority of women in this room have probably walked into a space that is just full of men. And you've probably walked in there and been like, oh, like, great, And I think that this experience shouldn't be like that. I don't think that we should have individual one-off grants to one woman SME or one woman-owned business. I think there needs to be cohorts. But I don't think that these cohorts should just be just women cohort. I don't want, for example, coding classes that are dumbed down and sparkled and glittered, and because I want women to be taken seriously. And I think that there's an element of a societal norm where when you have these sorts of experiences of constantly walking into these rooms and being the only woman, then you feel alienated from these types of institutions and from this industry. And so I think that we need more women supporting women in these types of sectors in order for it to be more high impact than it already is.
Thank you so much. I'd invite the audience to give our panel a huge round of applause. And please don't go anywhere, because actually we'd love to hear from members of the audience. We would like to turn now to all of you as delegates who may wish to speak. Please do indicate that by raising your hand. We've got some microphones that will roam. I will take speakers in the order that I see you. So number 1 and 2 and 3 and row 4. And please keep your interventions to approximately 90 seconds. If you have a longer statement that you'd like to make, you can share this with the UN Foundation team, who will work with the President of the General Assembly's team to ensure that your longer statement is integrated into the proceedings here, starting with yourself.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pranom Sumwong. Work with Protection International in Thailand. We work with the women human rights defender, who are actually mothers, carers, and communities defender. I think first of all, the issue is about political and social responsibility. We're still facing the challenging of the right to defend human rights is not being recognized or protection. So it's mean a lot of mother, carers, and the women who are resisting and resilient on COVID recovering, while they are taking care of the planet and their family, are still at risk of defending human rights. President Shahid talking about the care economy. I think the concrete answer is about care income. not care income has been recognized in many countries in this world. So it means women doesn't have the economic power in reality. So for us, it's care income. It's actually an answer for many women in many sectors. And also would be important to recognize that like lots of women I work in Thailand, they're taking care of the land and environment. There are many mothers, carers, and the grassroots community-based women human rights defender. They know very well how to organize the economy, but also they know very well how to organize their natural resources and also the COVID recovery around the human needs and collective care and the well-being. So the answer is how we do support that concrete wisdom and the experiences and skill of the women in the grassroots level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to the speaker right behind you, indeed, you've got the floor.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here today. My name is Wada Hadi. I'm from the Yemen Foreign Ministry, part of the Yemen delegation to the conference. I will be very brief. The strike of COVID showed us all that how much we are vulnerable. In Yemen, Your Excellency, you've been a couple of times, and you've seen yourself that there is a space for women in my country. We have mechanisms, national mechanisms available. The challenges under finance, access to knowledge, and I think also building capacity. And unfortunately, my country is still living a war due to the militia, the Houthi militia coup against the legitimate government 2014. And we are still living these consequences. We are suffering from the economic hardship. Unfortunately, women is very much vulnerable, and they are suffering the most. I wish to take this opportunity to draw your kind attention, Your Excellency, to the Safar tanker, which is, if the problem happened, it will have a consequence, very difficult or very serious implications on the environment. I'm pretty sure President Abdulla Shahid, my minister, shared with you quite a lot of concerns, and I'm pretty sure you've come into mutual understanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that intervention. And now there's a speaker right here in the middle. Yes, thank you. I think the microphone is just here. Right.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I'm the founder and president of a group called the G100. I had the opportunity to present ourselves to President Shahid, and we will be presenting ourselves to you. G100 is a group of 100 women across the world who wish to give back. It's a group that wishes to see gender equality become a reality by 2030, which is the year of the delivery of the UN SDGs, by making room for the men as well. So the she for she solidarity that you talked about, Angela, and also the he for she solidarity, which we call the Denim Club. So I have an offer and an ask. And the offer is, we are a network of 250,000 women across the world, and we have a mission million by next year. We will be 1 million women gender champions. So this is a group that wishes to give back. It's a voluntary collective. Anything we can do for everyone in the room in terms of mentoring, financial empowerment. We have 100 different wings, so we are here, and I will share my details with everyone before I leave. The ask is of the eminent influential decision makers on the dais to announce for the year 2025 a Stockholm 50-50, which would be a conference on gender and climate. Of course, it's such a tentative name, but the idea is to make it an equally inclusive women and men talking about gender and climate in solidarity. For me, S for Sweden, S for sustainability, and S for solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, to the speaker right behind you. Yes, indeed. Please introduce yourself as well.
Thank you so much. My name is Gro Lindstad, and I am the director of an NGO called Focus, Forum for Women in Development. I have an ask and a challenge to you and to all of us. We're here at Stockholm Plus 50. For the past 50 years, investment in women's organizing have been defined by the word micro or small scale. So we do micro banking, micro credits, micro this and that. And when you look at all funding going to climate change, 0.2% goes to gender equality and women's empowerment programming. Under 1% of funding goes to women's organizations. 5% of OECD funding goes to gender equality as the main object. To get gender equality and stop climate change, we also have to change the way we're thinking about inclusion. I say we have to have a feminist revolution, but at least we have to make some changes. So how do we do this together? Because it has to happen now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gro, and indeed, a big round of applause. This aspect of financing, both for gender responsive climate and directly to women's organizations at scale, feels like an unsolved problem that matters to everyone and matters to every country and to both people and planet. We do have one or two hands that I've seen in addition to the points that have just been made. So I do see the young woman, yes, right beside you, indeed. And please do indicate if there are any other hands. We've got just a few more minutes.
Hello, my name is Malpuri Groth, and I'm from the Swedish Women's Organizations, an umbrella organization for women's organizations in Sweden. And I would like to bring up 2 points, important points. One point is public funding and public reforms, but also obviously private investments. We always, every year, scrutinize the state budget and reforms, and we can see that although we have in Sweden a feminist government, we still see, especially like looking at the latest reforms on tackling the food and fuel prices, we could see even those responses went mostly to men. So that indicates that there is not enough to have a clear goal or calling yourself a feminist government. That has to be seen also in the money flows and expenses. And that's also super important to, that's one of our urges, to make sure that those good, nice words being heard here also are seen in the flows of money. The second just a related thing that I would like to address is also that you can see that when we looked at those funding spendings, we could see that a lot of incentives were put to men to act more as women. You see, for instance, that women's lifestyles and choices of how they spend their money are more climate smart, so to say. Although we do also see economic incentives for men to do as women. So what we want to see is that work, unpaid work, is also seen for women.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for these 5 different interventions from the floor. Unfortunately, we don't have additional time for more points from the floor, but I'd encourage you to provide your statements to a member of the UN Foundation who's at the periphery of the room, who will ensure that your points are integrated into the deliberations here at Stockholm Plus 50. I'd like you to join me in warmly thanking this esteemed panel, to this amazing panel of Cynthia, Diana, Angela, Minister Linda, President Shahid. We appreciate all of the points that you've brought. You have reminded us to prioritize women's leadership, agency, and voice from wherever we are. You have reminded us and told us about the priority of youth innovation, as well as youth vision for a transformation that is inclusive. You have highlighted, Minister Linda, to us the criticality of multi-stakeholder efforts and decent work in the transition to and inclusive economy. And you've highlighted also to Cynthia and Diana the importance of technology, as well as the importance of high-impact change that matters on the ground. This has been a substantive conversation, and I hope to all of us, it's enabled us to see that a transformative change is possible, where not only planet and people are put at the center, but gender-responsive recovery for all is critical. And thank you for the reminder of those lenses, a climate and a gender-just lens for the future. With this, I thank you for being part of this panel and wishing all of us a very good day here at Stockholm Plus 50. Thank you so much.